So, for what reason should, someone engage or study philosophy?
So it's a good question, especially in an age of crisis. You wonder what sitting around and reading a lot of old books is going to do for the good of humanity. Because on the surface, it doesn't do any good for anybody but you personally. Um, it's the difficulty of justifying the study of philosophy has been intensified by the economic crisis in the United States since 2008 that had the practical consequence of universities shutting down humanities programs across the board and diminishing the role of the liberal arts in general and philosophy in particular within American education and American culture. Marco Rubio, during the primaries, famously said, "We don't need more philosophers, we need more whatever, engineers," I think it was. A pretty alarming but not unsurprising statement. Philosophy has always been under assault. Socrates was put to death, after all, for being meddlesome. But that reveals something about the nature of philosophy and why it ought to be studied, precisely because it is meddlesome in a way. Philosophy is the attempt to replace opinions about things with knowledge and understanding of those things. In order to arrive at this knowledge and understanding, it has to, like any good science, proceed by means of evidence. The evidence is the evidence of the books themselves, the opinions of those who have thought these issues through deeply before us. Aristotle, Plato, Kant, Descartes, Nietzsche, Hume, St. Thomas Aquinas, whomever, you know. And it requires then conversation about what's in the books in order to learn from those teachers well.
So, not to interrupt,
Yeah,
but as
go
you
ahead.
say that, it just occurs that in many ways what you're asserting is actually countercultural.
Absolutely so.
Very, and not just with reference to the past few decades, but the character of specifically modern philosophy,
Mm-hmm.
uh, perhaps not intentionally, has a kind of anti-traditional view. It actually wants to sort of leave the texts of the past behind. And
Right.
I'm really alluding to the
Mm-hmm.
heritage of Descartes.
Sure, absolutely
And
so.
I don't know if you want to respond to that distinction.
It's well, curiously, and I think this is another reason for pursuing the study of philosophy in general, that argument that philosophy ought to abandon any sense of tradition, to start over, arises in tandem with another conviction, that philosophy has to have a task. It has to have a specific goal, and the goal is to benefit civil society or to create it or recreate it in a particular way. As a result, the traditional understanding of the goals of philosophy, not as task, but as contemplative activity, comes to be wholly effaced in modernity. One consequence of that effacement is an alteration in our relationship to nature and the natural as well as to one another that has had dire consequences, I think, for us. There's much talk now about us living in the Anthropocene era, a new geological era that has been fashioned from human transformation of the physical face of the earth. That is a bequest of modern philosophy, beginning with Bacon and Descartes, really, that the goal of philosophy is the task of mastery and possession of nature, as Descartes and Bacon both put the matter. And sure enough, Western culture, Western political life follows suit, so that modern natural science and modern political science march hand in hand pretty closely up until some of the catastrophes of the 20th century, where this arrangement is called into question, but it's never significantly abandoned. We live in an age where the future is utterly unpredictable owing to the human technological prowess. This, to me, is a dire problem that's only served by rewriting our orientation to nature. The modern scientific understanding of nature sees it as an object of manipulation. The ancient philosophical understanding of our relationship to nature sees it as an object, not as object at all, in fact, but as source, as origin, with in the face of which we enjoy a contemplative relationship. It's a relationship of non-manipulability par excellence. The reason we study philosophy, the reason I study philosophy, is to be able to call into question institutions, the progress of modernity, and seek origins, because finally philosophy wants to know why, and the answer to a why question is always an origin. It's both an historical origin and an origin of an idea itself. The idea of rational understanding of the world, without prophets, without revelations, just to the individual power of reason. It's hard to convince people to take responsibility for that. But that precisely is the goal of philosophy. It's a humanity because it humanizes us, and it's a liberal art because it liberates us.